All right. Hey, everyone. This is the new episode of this podcast. And today's my guest is Lena Boughton, who's a brand strategist and designer and founding partner at Studio Sculpture, a branding agency based in Europe and North America. Studio Sculpture works with purpose driven startups and scale ups to create, launch, and grow transformational brands. So, Lena, do you want to go from here and talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Maybe I'll just start with telling my story of kind of how I became an entrepreneur and started the studio and came to where I am, try and give the shortened version of it.
Sure, sure. Yeah.
Um, a bit of my background, I went to business school and studied marketing. I here in my hometown of Winnipeg in Canada. And I worked for a couple of different local agencies here on the client side, so doing project and account management. And I really liked working with agencies, but I felt a little bit unfulfilled in my client side, my purely client side roles. But I loved working with the creative teams anytime I could be involved in a strategy brainstorm or concepting work. That just really lit me up, and I knew that I needed to follow that passion. So after a couple of years, I decided to go back to school and study design. I knew that I would need a little bit of training to enter that world. And I found a program that looked really interesting in Berlin. I had always wanted to live in Europe, so I thought, if I'm making all these changes, why not completely turn my life upside down? And moved to Berlin and started a design program there. And while I was studying, I met my now business partners, my co-founders, Emma Scanning and Madeline Berg. Um, and we became great friends during the program. We were all freelancing on the side while we were studying and worked on a few projects together and just really clicked creatively and strategically. And when we finished the program, we decided, let's give it a shot. Let's give this thing a go and start a studio together. It seemed like a really good time. Coming out of a program, or out of a university program, we were already used to not making any money. So with that, how badly could it go? Let's give it a shot. And now we're actually,
Yeah.
this month is our 6-year anniversary of founding the studio. So we've had this thing rolling for a while, and it's just been kind of growing from there. We were lucky enough that while we were studying and we were students, because we were also working, we had built up a bit of a client base. So that made the transition into starting our own agency a little bit easier. And we all had some, other professional experience as well. So yeah, that's how I kind of came into entrepreneurship. It wasn't really something that I planned. There's a lot of entrepreneurs in my family, so I'd always been around it. But to be honest, I never really thought that it would be a path that I would follow so soon out of finishing my program. I thought it might be something that I'd dabble in eventually, but I just kind of fell into it and became happily stuck. And there's nowhere else I'd rather be.
Wow. First of all, congrats on the anniversary.
Thank
Six
you.
years is a lot of time, so that's a cool milestone.
It is.
I want to learn more about that switch from like your previous job to moving to Europe and starting the agency. How did that go? Was it hard? What the challenges you faced, and what did you learn from there?
Well, it was hard. And I think the hardest part for me was really just getting out of my own way and allowing it to happen. My intuition was really telling me that this was the path that I needed to take. But that felt really scary. It's funny now looking back, I felt like I was too old. I felt like there's so many other designers who've been at this for longer than me, and now I'm coming into this inexperienced, and I won't be good enough, I won't be talented enough, I won't be able to make it. Just all of those fears and self-doubts that I think are so commonplace among entrepreneurs. And those voices in my head, those self-critical voices, were really loud. So just taking that first step of actually doing the thing was probably the hardest. And then what I found, which I think is so often the case, is that once I started following my passion and following my joy and following the things that lit me up, as cheesy as that can sound, things really started rolling. I always notice this when I see, and this is why I love working with founders and with entrepreneurs, when I see people who are doing something that they love, it's like there's a light shining from them. It's so magnetic. You just want to be around them. You want to be around that energy, that passion, that drive. Um, and that was definitely my experience when I finally got out of my own way and started following my passions and doing the things that brought me joy. I started drawing the people to me who would kind of open doors and sort of light the way down this unfamiliar, kind of uncharted for me path. And then it's funny because it really came full circle in that, and again, this was unintentional, but that in founding this agency with my partners, all of that client side and project management experience and administrative experience that I had, really, really came to my aid, and now I do both. So in sort of trying to run away from this, the more client side of agency work, I came right back to it, but now in this really beautifully integrated way where I'm able to really express both of those sides of myself, and it's cool because I'm good at both of them, and now I don't have to choose. I get to do it all.
Yeah, yeah. So, do I understand correctly that really passion about design and branding, that was something that helped you made the decision to basically pivot into this industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So the creative is always what really lit me up, and the strategic work as well, which goes hand in hand with creative. I think that's something that's really foundational in our practice at our studio and our agency. Is that, like, design without strategy is, to me, it's not really design. It's just kind of a window dressing. So the really, like, strategic driven creative work is what I absolutely love. Creating a really strong strategy in a really strong position, and then thinking about, okay, how do we make this visual? How do we bring it to life? Um, so, like, the visioning and then the making visual.
Yeah, interesting. One thing that I'm really curious to ask you is, you really love design and like branding and strategy, right?
Mm.
But obviously, when you start an agency, a lot of the work you do is not just doing the thing, but also like searching, like looking for clients, doing
Mhm.
like marketing for the agency, and a lot of different things that you have to do as a business owner, right? So, how much maybe like the work of design and branding you do versus the actual business that you need to run and operations and stuff like that?
It's mostly the business that I need to run and the operations and the marketing. But I really enjoy that aspect of it as well. I'm a person who is a little bit restless and I get bored easily. And I think that's why I'm well suited to entrepreneurship, because the switching of hats feels comfortable for me. I like to have a few things that I'm juggling so that when I get bored, I can hop to the next thing or switch my focus. I also am, to my core, a people person, and so much of the work of running the business that I do is reaching out to potential clients, networking. I really just love meeting people and talking to people. So I love that aspect of it as well. And then I also have the benefit of having two partners. So because there's three of us, we're able to really kind of lean into our respective zones of genius and support each other. So if there's areas of the business that like I don't find so exciting, chances are that one of my business partners will be a little bit stronger in that area, and maybe a little bit more keen to jump in and support. So that really helps. I know that that's not the case for a lot of for a lot of solo entrepreneurs. Um, Although, of course, then there's always the option of outsourcing and hiring some support. I think that can be so key to maintaining your keeping your stride and keeping your business sustainable, because so much of it is about managing our energy and being able to keep ourselves going as entrepreneurs, I think.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And what I'm curious to learn from you is, um, and again, this is more on a personal level, but I think it would be really nice to learn. So, you said that 90% is probably running business of your time, and but you're still passionate about design and branding and strategies. Um, does like 10% or like knowing that you work on that specifically fulfill you? Or would it be like running any agency, maybe not specifically about brand and design, would be as much like interesting and fulfilling as like anything else? So, what do you think about this?
Well, for me, because our work is, when we take on a brand identity project, like our work is all project based. So it creates a really nice flow for me in that I always know that like the next creative project is coming. And then I'll be able to like for, some weeks really pour myself into that, and then maybe, step back or offload some of that other administrative or kind of operations work. So I always know there's something else coming, and that kind of relates to the how I really like switching my hats. So for me, it feels like it's in a really nice flow. Um, it definitely sustains my creativity. I also aside from the agency work, I'm also an artist and an illustrator, and I have my own personal creative practice. So if I'm at a point with my business where it's a little bit admin heavy, feeling a little dry, um, I have my personal creative practice to turn to, so that I can kind of turn up that dial when I need. And to any creative entrepreneur, I would really recommend that. And having my personal artistic practice has also um, really helped me to increase the quality of my design work and my corporate work, because I can kind of take my own ego out of it. I have my own art practice where I can, really pour all of my soul into when I need it. I know not all entrepreneurs that will be listening to this are in a creative field, but for anyone who is, I think that's really important and key.
Yeah, so 6 years into this agency, I believe it's like it was like a lot of experience, a lot of maybe ups and downs. Can you maybe guide us through, listeners and me through, how did that go? How did that grow from like day one to where you guys are now, and maybe
Mhm.
key milestones that you had?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's see. When we started, something that really helped us to grow the agency from the beginning, was that one of my we had one really strong or a couple of really strong retainer clients. Um, We still have a retainer model, but it's not really the core of our business any longer. But having that at the beginning for anyone who's interested in starting an agency can be really, really helpful to keep that baseline kind of level, to keep the work steady and the cash flow steady. And it was also really, really helpful for us to be kind of embedded and integrated into an in-house team. We were able to really learn a lot about how brands actually function day to day out in the wild. And that's something that I see to be kind of a weak point in some agency work, is that sometimes after being in an agency for a while, people can kind of lose touch with the day-to-day realities of working in-house. And so they can end up creating brands that are maybe really flashy and really cool and inspired and fun, but that are maybe too complicated, or the way that they function when you're actually trying to build out assets, they perhaps lack consistency, or just kind of lack some practicality. So that was a really, really beneficial experience for us, was working for quite a few years actually with this same client in-house. And then another really key milestone was that particular client went through a really big rebrand. They were quite a well-established tech company, and they went through a big rebrand when we were freelancing with them. And we came in on board. We didn't design the brand identity, but we came on board to serve as interim art directors while they built up their brand team, and we managed and produced the whole rollout of the rebrand. So that was a really, really interesting experience to have very early on in our journey. Onboarding new team members, again, seeing how does this identity really function in the world? How do we bring it to life? What are all of the things that we need to do to implement the brand on the other side? And so that was a really key moment for us. As a small agency, being able to see this really large scale rebrand and be a part of it, and really produce the whole launch was a very pivotal moment for us. And following that, I think being a part of that project gave us the confidence and the practical skills to be able to start going after larger projects ourselves. It was a real boot camp. And now we're navigating kind of a different shift in our business, which is more on the personal side of things. So 2.5 years ago, I had a kid. And 10 months after that, one of my other business partners also became a mom. And so that's a huge career shift to navigate, of course, becoming a parent, and then balancing that with being a business owner. And that change actually sparked a big change. That personal change sparked a big change in our business when I decided to move back to Canada from Berlin, where we had founded the agency, and to be closer to my family support system. And so we've gone fully remote now. I'm here in Canada. Our partner Madeline has moved back to Sweden to be closer to her family in Stockholm, and then our third partner Emma is splitting her time between Berlin and Sicily. So we've gone fully remote as a studio, which has been a really nice change. We were, didn't really know what to expect, but that's been another pivotal moment, and it's been really fantastic for us both personally and professionally. It's so cool that we can work this way. We can be in the same design file. It's like do everything in Figma. We can be in the same design file at the same time, leaving comments for each other and watching each other's cursor move around as we work on the same project. And I think a really key part of being able to navigate that change so smoothly was that we had 5 years of working next to each other physically in the same space. So that made that a lot that made that transition a lot smoother.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to ask before you mentioned it, that the fact that you guys worked like for a long, long time together physically, the remote work wasn't as challenging as it might have been should have you not met each other in person before, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, from a creative and strategic perspective, we joke that we're like a three-headed design monster. We're so lockstep from working side by side physically for so long, and peeking each other over each other's shoulders and offering feedback. But of course, there's always going to be like founders will co-founders will bump up against each other, and that's part of where the growth happens. And in my experience, when that happened in person, it made it a lot easier for us to overcome those little bumps and obstacles. And now we have that really, really solid base, so that the physical distance doesn't feel so great. And we're always only a plane ride away if we do need to be in person.
Yeah, that's really awesome that you guys figured out how to really make the remote work efficient and keep going with that. Um, yeah, so maybe you want to share some of the, I don't know, top three learnings or mistakes or challenges or anything that you really learned over the years running this agency that you would
Yeah.
have told yourself like 6 years ago.
Yeah. Ooh, that's a really good question. I think one of the key learnings, and this is something that we've been kind of working on overhauling these past past half a year, I guess, is to implement systems that really work for you. I think systems and frameworks are so important. And for me, structure really allows for freedom. Particularly, we're doing creative work that, requires a lot of like blue sky out of the box thinking. But having a solid framework and a solid system in place just takes so much of the stress out, so that our brains are actually able to be creative and come up with great ideas. And whether you're doing like quote unquote creative work or not, all business is creative. So having those solid systems and foundations in place is so key, and not being afraid to constantly be revising and revisiting and refining those systems as well, I think is really, really important. Another thing is learning when to say no. um, I think that's a bit of a cliche at this point, because we hear that a lot, but I think it's so important to remember, because everything that we do leads to the next thing. So I think as an entrepreneur, as a business owner who's, you're charting your own path, you've got to be really intentional about where you place your next step and what you pour your energy into, because it's going to grow. So whatever you feed is going to grow. Another thing that's been really, really helpful for me, and this maybe sounds like a little bit separate from something business related, but I think like learning to becoming aware of your nervous system and learning how to self-regulate is so, so important for this entrepreneurship life. Um, as we all know, there's so many ups and downs, and we've got to be juggling a lot of different things and wearing lots of different hats all the time. It can be a pretty stressful journey. And just coming up with some tools that work for you to help regulate yourself and ride the waves on a little bit more of an even keel will take you so far, and help you avoid burnout, which is a danger that we all face, whether you're an entrepreneur or not. So find what works for you, whether it's meditation or walks in nature or exercise, journaling, whatever it is. I think that self-awareness and ability to regulate yourself when you're feeling stressed is like so paramount to finding sustainable success and just having a happy life. And then I said this before, but following your joy, finding out what's your zone of genius, what brings you joy, and then following those little sparks. I think that's so important. Otherwise, like, what's the point?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. One other question I definitely want to touch on before we start wrapping it up is, do you plan to scale this agency, or are you happy with maybe the maybe small business? Um, I don't know how to express that.
Hmm.
Just keeping it without like growing and trying to make it bigger and bigger and bigger. So how do you see that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and I think an important one, particularly in the field that I'm in, working with a lot of startups where it's scale, scale, scale. So far, we've intentionally stayed really small. It's helped us ride waves of change in the industry. And it's being small has allowed us to stay really lean and flexible, and allowed us to kind of make pivots when needed. It's also allowed us to stay really, really connected to the creative work, which, as I said, is very important for us. So, right now, we really love our structure where we're able to still do the creative work, most of the creative work ourselves, but we're able to activate our network and assemble the right team of creatives for the right project when the needs come up. Um, but not having all of those creatives on staff all the time allows us to be a little bit more intentional with the projects that we take on. We're able to only take on projects that are really aligned, and enables us to do what I was just saying, of that staying in our zone of genius and following our joy, because we don't have this massive overhead to worry about. So I don't know what the future will hold. I'm not opposed to scaling or growing a team, but I think it would be something that would have to come up. I think organically we'll know if and when the time is right.
Yeah, yeah, sounds awesome. And maybe one of the last things is, if you want to share something with the audience, maybe the key learning or just something that you think is really important for a listener. Do you have anything to do that?
Yeah, well, I would say I think one of my biggest key learnings, I've been thinking about this a lot lately, is learning how to give and receive feedback is so important, not only for my industry, but for any founder. Um, Learning how to kind of separate your self-worth from the work that you do so that you're able to objectively and somewhat neutrally receive feedback and integrate that feedback and improve your work, um, is really so important. If you're not able to take feedback well, you're missing opportunities for growth left, right, and center. Of course, you have to be discerning about where you take that feedback from, because otherwise, you could be really scattered in what you're implementing. Nobody else can run your business other than you and your partners and your team. Um, and then on the other hand, also learning to give honest feedback makes for way stronger relationships, both within your co-founding team, your wider team, your clients, your customers. I think yeah, learning how to give and take feedback is one of the most important things that I think any founder can work on.
Yeah, definitely. Like personally, it's been quite a challenge to really learn to listen because you really want yourself to be right all the time, but you're never 100% right, and you always have to objectively, or at least try to objectively, listen to the feedback and make some conclusions and make sure that you're growing. And like if you're building a product, probably as well as building an agency, you have to really understand your customer, what they really want, and that way you really bring the most value to them.
Absolutely, and this is something that we've implemented
Absolutely.
a while ago is we always have a conversation with our clients after we wrap a project and really ask them to share honestly with us what was positive, what could we have improved on, um, and and from those conversations, that's when the most interesting growth comes for us. We create a space where it's really clear that like you can be honest with me. My feelings are not going to get hurt. This is separate from me, and that's where those you can find those gems of you can find your shine some light on your blind spots of like, oh, I didn't know that that thing I was doing was coming across that way. That's not what I intended. And I think that, yeah, learning to be able to have those conversations is so helpful. And something that really helps with it is, and this is one of my core values and one of our core values at the studio is maintaining an attitude and cultivating an attitude of curiosity. So if you can just come at feedback from a place of curiosity, saying, "Oh, maybe there's something there. How can I integrate that?" It'll take you really far.
Yeah, yeah, awesome feedback. Yeah, I think we could wrap up now. Great insights, great sharings. Lana, really enjoyed this episode. Thanks again for coming, and hope to see you once again in the future.
Thank you.